Well, hey there, friends. Pull up a chair and pour yourself some coffee. You're tuned to Classic Country TV, and this week in country music history is chock full of birthdays, breakthroughs, and a few hard lessons that shaped the songs we love. We've got the singing brakeman, the high-lonesome mandolin, two of the greatest voices to ever step to a microphone, and a moment that turned pain into purpose. Let's ride. First, a quick lightning spin through the calendar for the week of September 8th through the 14th. September 8th brings us two giants born on that date. Jimmie Rodgers back in 1897 down in Mississippi, and Patsy Cline in 1932 up in Winchester, Virginia. September 9th, 1956, Elvis Presley shakes up Sunday Night America on The Ed Sullivan Show. Rockabilly may be a cousin, but those roots tangle right into country's family tree. September 9th is also the day in 1996 when we said goodbye to Bill Monroe, just 4 days before his own birthday on September 13th. On September 11th, 1984, Barbara Mandrell survives a terrible car crash near Nashville that changes the course of her life. September 12th, 1931, George Jones is born in Texas, the Possum himself. And on September 13th, 1952, Webb Pierce joins the Grand Ole Opry, carrying honky-tonk swagger onto that famous Ryman stage. Now let's settle in and do this right. If you love Grand Ole Opry, history, and classic country hits, this one's for you. Let's start with Patsy Cline's birthday. Virginia Patterson Hensley grew up tough and talented, and by the time America heard Walkin' After Midnight, the country world knew there was something regal in that voice. Smoke and satin, but anchored in honky-tonk heart. I Fall to Pieces, Crazy, those weren't just hits. They were a new way to cross the county line and still keep your boots on. Patsy taught Nashville how to glide without losing the grit. Her phrasing is a master class, the kind singers still study because she could lean into a note like a friend leaning across the kitchen table. Honest, direct, unforgettable. On this week in country music history, we light a candle for a voice that never goes out. Just a few days later on our calendar comes George Glenn Jones, born September 12th, 1931. Now some singers tell you a story. George makes you live it. From the mischievous spark of White Lightning to the ache that stops time and He Stopped Loving Her Today. His vocals have this slow burn gravity, like a steel guitar learned to talk. Folks call him the Rolls-Royce of country voices for a reason. He could bend a syllable until it confessed its secrets, turn a 3-minute song into a whole lifetime of loving and losing. When we talk about the modern country ballad, the patience, the spaces between the notes, that's George's blueprint. Happy birthday, Possum. We're still learning from you. Now here's a circle that feels almost poetic. Bill Monroe, the father of bluegrass, was born September 13th, 1911, and he passed from this world this very week, on September 9th, 1996. Monroe didn't just front a band, he invented a sound. He put the mandolin out front and said, "Let's chase that high, lonesome sound." Fiddle up top, banjo rolling, the bass walking steady, voices stacked like mountain ridges. He took it to the Opry. He named his band the Bluegrass Boys after his home state, and before long he'd planted a whole new tradition. Without Bill Monroe, there's no standard map for festival pickers and no highway for all the artists who carried that spark into new places. This week in country music history, we don't just remember a man. We remember the trunk of the tree all those branches grow from. We've also got a story that's hard but important. Barbara Mandrell's crash, September 11th, 1984. At the height of her fame, television variety show, awards, packed tour dates, Barbara is badly injured in a head-on collision outside Nashville. The other driver, heartbreakingly, loses his life. Barbara's recovery takes months, and the emotional wait lasts far longer. Out of that wreckage, she becomes a vocal champion for seatbelt use, telling the world that buckling up saves lives. Country music is a neighborly genre at its core. Turning personal pain into public service is part of that spirit. Barbara's story belongs in this week not just because it happened here, but because it changed how a lot of folks drove home from a show. Let's tip our hat to the man who helped set the whole thing rolling, Jimmie Rodgers, born September 8, 1897. The singing brakeman carried railroad dust on his boots and the blues in his pocket, turning yodels into headlines and heartbreak into a national language. Before the industry had a roadmap, Rodgers sketched one in pencil, a star who could straddle country blues and pop and make it all feel like front porch music. When we say the roots, we're talking about him. Now, let's slide over to our chart and radio corner, because the numbers tell stories too. On the country chart, dated September 9th, 1967, Buck Owens is sitting at number 1 with Your Tender Loving Care, that Bakersfield twang cutting clean through the AM air. Steel bright as fresh chrome, drums popping like a dance hall floor. Merle Haggard's Branded Man is right there in the mix, and you can hear a West Coast sound rewriting Nashville's playbook in real time. Fast forward to September 12th, 1992, when Vince Gill's I Still Believe in You holds the top of the country chart. Silk and steel in perfect balance, a masterclass in 90s radio craftsmanship. And out on the pop side, the Hot 100 dated September 13th, 1975 belongs for a second week to Glen Campbell's Rhinestone Cowboy, a shining example of country pop done right. Big chorus, big heart, and a hook you can't shake. While we're standing on that Opry circle, here's one more moment worth savoring. September 13th, 1952. Webb Pierce joins the Grand Ole Opry. Think rhinestones, twin fiddles, and a voice that could skate across a dance floor. Webb helped carry honky-tonk swagger right into Saturday night tradition. Opry history isn't just about the building, it's about the characters who fill it with color. Webb brought a whole paint box. And since this week is so rich, I'll allow myself one near-week honorable mention, just to tip the hat properly. On September 5th, 1967, just a couple of days outside our window, a 21-year-old Dolly Parton steps onto the Porter Wagoner Show for the first time. That partnership launches a rocket that still hasn't landed, and it leads straight to Opry stages and worldwide stardom. Sometimes the fuse is short, and sometimes it's a slow burn, but either way, Dolly's spark catches fire right there. So what do all these threads stitch together? This week in country music history reminds us how the sound keeps renewing itself, how a brakeman's yodel becomes a blueprint, how a Winchester songbird teaches Nashville to soar, how the high-lonesome mandolin builds a whole architecture of American music, how a Texas voice shows us the art of feeling, and how a star facing tragedy chooses to make the world a little safer. The charts tell us what folks were humming on payday. The Opry tells us where they gathered to hear it. And the birthdays remind us that legends start out as kids with a dream and a sound in their head. If this ride through the golden decades put a smile on your face, do me a favor. Like, subscribe, and share it with a friend who loves the old stuff. Drop your favorite Patsy cut, your all-time George tearjerker, your go-to Buck Owens twanger, or your fondest bluegrass memory down in the comments. Next week, we'll be back with more stories from the 1900s to the 1990s. More Grand Ole Opry history, more classic country hits, and more tales from the people who built the soundtrack of our lives. Until then, keep the record spinning and the circle unbroken.